I developed a descriptive map of the objectives of education, and I'd like to give you some details today about how this came about and what its function and purpose would be. So I want to start out with the concept of a descriptive map, and then see how a descriptive map is really of value to us and how that applies to education. So I'm going to give you some examples. Obviously, if you look at geography, it's a classic example of a descriptive map. I'm going to give you some more examples. For example, you could have a linguistic map, and a linguistic map changes all the time and also gives you different information. Then we can obviously look at the electromagnetic wave spectrum and say that's a descriptive map. Very interesting example. We can look at periodic table. And I remember as a child, I thought it was set and done, and of course several elements have been added in recent years. Last one to show you would be, for example, the tree of life, the animal kingdom. And this is as you look at kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So why do we care about descriptive maps? Obviously, it gives you a frame of reference. It immediately brings also something else in consideration, and that is, where are you? In other words, if you look at a map of a city belongs to a bigger region, to a state, of a province, and to a country, and to a continent, and to the globe, and to a solar system, and so on and so on. So that idea that you can zoom to really identify where you are and what matters, that is really powerful if we understand the value of zoom to contextualize us appropriately. Because once you've understand the zoom factor and where you are, then your conversations about the subject matter at hand can immediately be understood about what zoom level you're talking at. In other words, it could be a granular issue, or it could be a very broad perspective issue. Understanding the zoom level, you can then appropriately adjust and make order and create better structure of the conversation and of the activities around it. So in education, I were to ask you what are the objectives of education, I'd say the most common answer I've found would be that people refer to Bloom's taxonomy and say it's the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor domain. That obviously harks back to the Middle Ages. In that time they referred to the head, the hand, and the heart. And so Bloom elaborated quite a bit on the cognitive area. Since then, more research has been done in the other two areas. The model that I'll be presenting to you today does not replace that, but I think it is a bigger picture and somewhat different picture, but it does not necessarily counter that. So I'd like to present to you the model right off, and that is, it is called the FITL model. It is fundamentals, instructions, teachings, and leadership. So I'll start in the middle. There's a significant difference between instructions and teachings. The teachings of Christ, the instructions of Christ. You can immediately feel the difference there. Thus, this prying apart the difference here was where this whole model started. Then once I had instructions clarified, and I'll touch on it in a second. Once I had instructions clarified, it was rather obvious that there is a level below it that we often do not refer to, and that is fundamentals. And then with fundamentals, instructions, and teachings, the model stayed stable for quite a while, and it was called the FIT model. And then the final component of leadership was added. And that's a new component, it's a new term, and I am defining it in this presentation as well, because it is something that is definitely a novel idea in many cases. So I want to now refer to some of the details of the model that I've got. As I say, with fundamentals, the objective is automaticity. It is not reflection, but reflexive handling and reaction. where does this matter? This matters as I'm speaking to you now. I, in an automated way, combine sounds to form words. In an automated way, I combine my words to form sentences. And of course, my sentences to follow a specific thought pattern and discourse. So there are levels of automaticity that is essential just to be able to speak, to do math. So in many areas, the level of automaticity has to be established and it has to be achieved, because that gives you the ability to function at the next level. An example that I will give you about tennis as we deal with instructions. So once again, as we look at the level here, automaticity with fundamentals is the core. It's a fact-centered thing. You try to, you'll see in a second of why. It focuses on facts. And then your proof of contextualized automatic performance, automated performance, is really essential. So if we look at the next level, that's instructions. Expertise is your objective. You want to become an expert. Now, it's not fact-centered. Instructions are objective-centered. You've got objectives that you are trying to achieve. And so your proof that you've got here is of reflective problem-solving skills. So let me give you the example of tennis. You're an expert tennis player. Expertise is what you're after. Most likely a professional player. So as someone plays against you and gives you a very fast ball, and your only option is to return it with a backhand, you would want to be in a situation where you do not concern yourselves with, can I do a backhand? But that you're such an expert at it that you look at, where am I going to place the ball to play best in the situation. If you're at that level, there's obviously the fundamentals in place, the muscle memory, everything in place to do a backhand. You can now lay on top of that a reflective skill, a reflective problem-solving skill of, where am I going to place the ball? And those things come together and you do the necessary. So that's an example of how the fundamental layer is essential to serve the next layer, and that is your instructional layer. So let's move on and take a look at the next. The next is very different in a way, and that is the layer of teachings. With fundamentals and with instructions, there was proof. You could prove automaticity, or you could prove a reflective problem-solving skill. I could show you how I can ride a bicycle. There's proof of all these things that pertain to the fields of fundamentals and instructions. When it comes to teachings, it's a human-centered environment. And this is where we focus on values, on morals, on judgment. And so in this environment, there is evidence, but it's not an environment of proof. For example, let's take honesty. If you claim to be honest, it is not fair for me to say prove it, but rather, is there evidence that you're honest? There is obviously proof in a specific instance of honesty or not, but as a being, it's a much bigger question that we look at. And so there's evidence that guides us in a specific way. So the field of teachings is really, really, really important in this field, because this is where our ethical and our moral foundation lies. This is where we focus on people first, not objectives, where we understand ourselves, where we form an identity of who we are as a being, not just in what we can do and what we know, but as a being, we are very much shaped in this realm. So if an evil leader wanted to create a bomb and goes to a physicist and says, I hear you have the expertise to put this bomb together. Will you do it for me? You will be richly rewarded. In education, if you look at it, the fundamentals and the instructional levels are at place, this person is an expert. But if the moral level is not in place, if there's not a sanctity for life, if you're not human-centered, you would go ahead and build a bomb and not ask any further questions and be grateful for the reward. yet with human-centeredness and with that anchor that I just described in the realm of teachings, you cannot build that bomb. So this is a very important layer as it connects us to our community, to identify who we are as a being ourselves. I also saw something very significant here, and that is a core objective in life is not to crack under pressure. Pressure comes in many forms. It could be a temptation to take money, or body lust, hunger, your sexual drive, thirst. It could be for power, selfish gains. All these things are means and in modes of pressure. So it is significant that we do not crack under pressure. When we're not under pressure, most of us hold up just fine. But it's exactly when we're under pressure that we want to sustain ourselves in our beliefs in who we are as a being and be consistent there. That is why the field of teachings is a very significant field. Look at education, there's a real emphasis on the instructional part, but the teachings side is often not as strong as it should be. Now let's get to the final area, that is leadership. The word might not sit well initially, and you would say, why couldn't you have picked leadership? There's a significant difference here that makes this a very important word. Leadership is meant to have a leader and a follower. So if you train for leadership, you're going to have a crowd under you and you will lead. That's your job. Leadership is different. It does not assume a leader and a follower relationship. It does mean that you lead. It means that you are an exemplar, that you show forth excellence in who you are. And this goes in many directions. So I'm not trying to narrow it to a specific field. It's meant to be open. But you are just a stellar being in who you are and how you live your life and how you take ownership of learning, of knowing, of producing new knowledge. You are inventive in where you go with your life. So that is the final category that is added. In other words, if we were to look at a world without leadership, what would we have? You would have people that very dutifully learn what they're supposed to learn. So you see an immediate hierarchical structure of the person that knows and all those that follow. And it kind of assumes once you've learned that, you are now done, because this is where it is. And so it's like topping up a glass. Once it's topped up, it's done. Whereas we know the world of knowledge is expanding all the time. And we are meant to think in ways that we assume that responsibility of contributing to the expansion of knowledge. So with leadership, we take a definite lead in life, but it is not an assumed lead over other people, but a lead in who we are. So we lead ourselves to the cusp of excellence and thus become an exemplar. That is something everyone can do. As you look at education, if you say you all have to be leaders, that is maybe a stretch. Not all will be leaders, but with the concept of leadership, each of us can aspire to excellence and should be encouraged to do so.